Have you ever wondered what happens to those who fall, not in glorious battle, but in the endless, grinding machinery of the Imperium itself? Not the heroes sung by Ministorum choirs, not the saints carved in marble, but the nameless, forgotten billions who bleed, break, and rot beneath the weight of humanity's greatest empire. This is their story, and it is not a kind one. In the Imperium of Man, there is no true concept of mercy. Mercy is a resource, and like all things under the God Emperor's rule, it is rationed, taxed, and sold to the highest bidder. When a worker collapses on a manufacturing floor, crushed beneath steel or poisoned by fumes, there are no doctors rushing to his side. There is no gentle hand or soft voice. There is only the shriek of machinery still running, because halting production would displease the overseers. The man lies there, twitching, his lungs coughing up black dust, and if he's lucky, someone drags him to the medicae pits before he dies. The medicae wards of the Imperium are not hospitals. They are graveyards that pretend to heal. The air smells of disinfectant and decay. Rows of cots stretch into darkness, filled with bodies that moan, whisper, or simply stare at the ceiling, waiting for pain to end, or for the Emperor's mercy to come in the only form most ever receive, death. There are few doctors, fewer true medicae adepts. Most are half-trained orderlies, servitors wired to dispense recycled fluids, or chirurgeons with more faith than skill. They patch flesh with metal, bone with rust, and call it salvation. In hive city spires, the rich buy augmetics of gold and silver, but down in the underhive, the broken are given metal scraps, jagged limbs from decommissioned soldiers, or rotting vat-grown replacements that hum with infection. It is said that the lower levels of many hive medicae bays resemble scrapyards more than wards. People whisper that some chirurgeons sell organs to tech priests, trading lungs and eyes for machine oil, and yet, the ecclesiarchy calls it divine reclamation, for even the parts of the fallen can serve the Emperor's greater plan. A man wakes on a steel table. He was a miner once, strong, proud. Now one arm is gone. In its place, a crude augmetic twitches with a life of its own, an ill-fitted mechanical limb that grinds when he moves. He does not remember consenting to this. The chirurgeon tells him it was Emperor's will. He tries to stand, but pain sears through his spine. He screams, and the sound echoes through the ward until a servitor silences him with a dose of anesthetic, recycled from another patient's waste fluids. He will live, they say. He should be grateful. To live in the Imperium is to serve, and to serve is to suffer. The administratum records injury and death with the same bureaucratic detachment as grain quotas. A worker crushed under a loading crane is not a tragedy. It is a subtraction from production output. There are forms for that. Form 77B for limb loss. Form 98F for death by malfunction. Every corpse, every shattered body, is another line item in the ledger of the Imperium's endless machine. In the great hospitals of the ecclesiarchy, those meant for the faithful, things are no kinder. Priests walk the halls preaching endurance, telling the wounded that pain is holy, that the Emperor tests his children through agony. Some believe it. Others whisper curses into blood-soaked sheets, praying not for salvation, but for oblivion. The sisters hospitaller tend to the faithful with dutiful precision, yet even they cannot heal the billions who suffer. For every sister with a vial of true medicae serum, there are 10,000 who receive only recycled fluids and prayer. Above them all, the Adeptus Mechanicus watches. To the tech priests, the human body is an inefficient machine, a vessel destined to fail. They see flesh as weakness, pain as data, and the broken as raw material for augmentation. On forged worlds, the wounded are upgraded, their ruined limbs replaced with sacred steel, their pain overridden by code. Some call this salvation, but few realize how much humanity is lost in the process. When the machine replaces the man, what remains of the soul? The priests of Mars say it does not matter. The Omnissiah does not grieve the flesh. Yet somewhere in the endless dark, there are whispers of the unsanctioned healers, the rogue medicae, men and women who once served in the Astra Militarum or under the Mechanicus, now outcasts, hiding in the underhive. They work with stolen tools, healing the desperate in exchange for scraps or protection. To the Imperium, they are heretics. To the poor, they are saints. Many are hunted and executed for medical blasphemy, a crime defined as healing, without authorization of the ecclesiarchy or the Mechanicus. Their clinics burn, and their patients vanish into mass graves. Still, more rise to take their place, because even in the Imperium's coldest corners, there are those who remember what it means to care. A soldier returns from war. His regiment has been wiped out. He drags himself off the ship, coughing up ash from a world that no longer exists. The medicae bay is overflowing. He waits days before anyone sees him. By the time a chirurgeon approaches, infection has already spread through half his body. They amputate without anesthesia. There is no need to waste it on the dying. When it is over, he is discharged back into the streets, a cripple among billions. No pension, no gratitude, no name. He kneels before a statue of the Emperor and whispers, "Was it worth it?" The stone does not answer. This is the truth of Imperial healing. It is not designed to save. It is designed to preserve functionality, to return the body to service, no matter the cost. If you can work, you live. If you cannot, you are disposed of, recycled, forgotten. The administratum keeps no record of compassion, only efficiency. And in a galaxy of endless war, compassion is inefficient. Across countless worlds, hospitals crumble, supplies rot. Priests bless empty syringes because faith is all they have left. A mother clutches her fevered child and prays for a medicae to come. None do. When the child dies, she wraps the body in rags and leaves it at the shrine. By morning, the corpse is gone, claimed by the corpse collectors, the silent servants who gather the dead for cremation or repurposing. The mother returns home and goes back to work. There is no time for grief. The Emperor protects, but not all. To live in the Imperium is to endure pain as proof of loyalty. The sermons say that those who suffer are closest to divinity, that the broken are blessed, but in truth, the broken are simply forgotten. Billions bleed unseen in the shadows of cathedrals that pierce the clouds, in the slums beneath the hive towers, in the toxic pits of forged worlds, where lungs blacken before a man turns 20. These are the citizens of the Imperium, and the Imperium treats them not as people, but as parts of a machine that must never stop turning. Somewhere, deep in an under-hive medicae ward, an old nurse whispers a prayer over a dying patient. No one listens. The machines hum. The air stinks of blood and oil. But she keeps whispering anyway, because it is all she can do. In the distance, the bells of the ecclesiarchy toll another hour. Shift change. Another 1,000 wounded dragged in. Another 1,000 carried out. Nothing changes. Nothing ever will. And above it all, the propaganda voxcasters blare the same message across every world. Rejoice. Citizens of the Imperium, your suffering is proof of your devotion. The Emperor watches. The Emperor loves. The Emperor heals. But the people know better. The Emperor may heal the soul, but the flesh is left to rot. Faith is the lifeblood of the Imperium. It flows stronger than blood, louder than pain, and deeper than reason. Every citizen is taught from birth that suffering is sacred, that agony purifies, and that to endure torment is to please the God Emperor himself. But behind the sermons and hymns lies a truth too terrible to speak aloud. Faith is also the greatest tool of control the Imperium has ever known. In the great cathedrals of the ecclesiarchy, golden statues rise higher than the roofs of entire hive blocks. Priests dressed in crimson and gold preach from pulpits shaped like burning suns, their voices amplified through ancient vox systems that echo across the hive. They tell the sick and the broken that their pain is not meaningless, it is divine. When a mother cries over her dying son, she is told that the Emperor tests her faith. When a worker's body gives out from exhaustion, the priests say his spirit is being refined like metal in the forge of devotion. The words are beautiful. The reality is monstrous. The ecclesiarchy calls it sanctified endurance. But to the citizens who live it, it feels like punishment without crime. There are no hospitals of comfort in the Imperium, only chapels of repentance disguised as wards. The medicae beds are lined beneath stained glass windows depicting saints who were burned alive, torn apart, or flayed for their faith. The message is clear. Pain is holy, and death in faith is better than life in doubt. A woman named Serana worked the manufacturing lines for 30 years before her lungs failed. She coughed black dust every night until she could no longer stand. When her family brought her to the medicae bay, the first thing the priests asked was not her name, but whether she had tithed. The ecclesiarchy demanded a small donation for the Emperor's blessing. When her family could not pay, the priest marked her as low priority. She waited 3 days before anyone looked at her. By then, her body was cold. At her funeral, the priest spoke of her faithful endurance. Her children said nothing. They had learned the lesson well. Silence is safer than truth. Across the Imperium, faith is currency. The more you have, the better your chances of survival. To question the priests is to invite punishment. To seek treatment without their approval is to invite execution. The Adeptus Mechanicus controls not only the spirit, but the body. and they use the promise of healing as leverage. Confess your sins, they say. Repent your doubts. Perhaps the emperor will spare you, and the people obey, because hope, no matter how cruel, is still hope. In the pilgrim cities of Ophelia 7, thousands of sick and crippled crawl on bleeding knees through the streets, hoping to touch the steps of St. Catherine's Basilica. Some die before they reach the doors. Others are trampled beneath the feet of those more desperate. The priests look down from the balconies, reciting prayers of absolution. To them, every death in devotion is a victory for the emperor. They do not see suffering, they see faith made flesh. And the broken bodies left behind? They are collected by silent servitors and dumped into sanctified pits, burned with incense and holy oils. Purified, the priests say. Forgotten, the people whisper. It wasn't always this way. Long ago, before the age of apostasy, the ecclesiarchy still claimed to heal. They built true hospitals, run by the Sisters Hospitaller, women of compassion and discipline who sought to mend both flesh and soul. But centuries of corruption and war changed everything. Now, even the sisters are stretched thin, their noble order buried under endless bureaucracy and false priests who see more profit in faith than in medicine. In some worlds, the Sisters Hospitaller still try to do what they can. They ride through battlefields in armored ambulances, risking their lives to save soldiers. But for the common citizen, the worker, the hive-born child, the broken servant, their kindness is a myth told in sermons. A dying man once asked a priest, "Why does the emperor not heal me? I have prayed every day." The priest smiled gently and said, "Because your suffering feeds his glory, my child. To die in pain is to be closer to his light." Then he left the man alone in the dark. Everywhere in the Imperium, you hear the same phrase whispered in the shadows: faith heals. It's painted on walls, printed on ration boxes, carved into the sides of medicae stations. But it doesn't heal, it numbs. It numbs people to their own misery, convinces them that the cruelty they endure has meaning. And for the administratum and ecclesiarchy, that is enough. A population that believes pain is sacred will never rise against the ones who cause it. In hive city slums, street preachers shout from cracked pulpits, waving relics made of scrap metal and bone. "Rejoice," they cry. "Your hunger is proof of devotion. Your fever is a test of loyalty." Crowds listen, not because they believe, but because they fear silence more than lies. To be seen ignoring a priest's sermon is to invite suspicion, and suspicion is death. So they nod, they chant, they weep. And somewhere in the crowd, another child faints from starvation. Another elder collapses. Another mother prays for a miracle that will never come. The Ministorum knows this cycle well. They call it the holy equilibrium. Too much despair leads to rebellion. Too much hope leads to heresy. But the right amount of controlled suffering keeps a world obedient for centuries. They measure faith like water, enough to keep the people alive, never enough to make them strong. And when despair grows too heavy to control, the ecclesiarchy turns to spectacle. Public rituals, purges, miracles. A priest proclaims that a saint's relic wept blood. Thousands gather to witness. In the chaos, the suffering is forgotten, replaced by awe and terror. Faith becomes theater. Pain becomes entertainment. And the forgotten masses, desperate for meaning, cling tighter to their chains. Yet, even in the darkest corners of the Imperium, there are cracks in the facade. A few brave priests whisper that the emperor does not desire their pain, only their strength. Some risk their lives smuggling medicine instead of relics, hiding forbidden tech under robes of gold. They are hunted as heretics, but their names are remembered in secret prayers, because even in a galaxy built on cruelty, compassion is rebellion. A story is told of a sister hospitaller named Muriel. She worked in a plague ward on a hive world abandoned by the administratum. When her supplies ran out, she refused to leave. For 40 days, she tended the dying with nothing but water and prayer. When the plague took her, the survivors built a shrine from the ruins of her ward. They called her Saint of the Forgotten. The ecclesiarchy denied her sainthood, but the people remember her name, because she was the only one who ever stayed. In the end, faith in the Imperium is not a comfort. It is a leash, gilded with scripture and soaked in blood. The priests say it binds humanity together, but in truth, it binds humanity in chains. And those chains grow tighter every century, every sermon, every prayer whispered by lips too weak to speak anything else. When night falls in the hive, and the vox hymns fade, you can still hear the whispers of the forgotten, soft voices in the dark, begging for a miracle that never comes. They pray not for the emperor to save them, but for him to remember they exist at all. And perhaps, somewhere beyond the stars, he hears them. Perhaps, in some silent corner of eternity, he weeps for what his empire has become, but his tears cannot reach them. They fall into the void, unseen, unheard, just like the faithful who die believing he will heal them, because in the Imperium, faith may fill the soul, but the body still rots. There is a sound that echoes through every forged world, a cold, metallic hymn that drowns out the screams of the dying. It is the sound of the machine god's mercy, a mercy measured not in compassion, but in efficiency. When the flesh fails in the Imperium, it is the Mechanicus that claims what remains. The Adeptus Mechanicus, priests of iron and logic, see the human body not as sacred, but as obsolete. To them, the body is an imperfect vessel, a malfunctioning machine built of weak materials, bound by emotion and hunger, and when that machine breaks, it must be repaired or replaced. They do not call it healing. They call it augmentation. In the red-lit halls of Mars and its countless forges, the wounded and the crippled are brought before tech priests whose faces are masks of bronze and chrome. Their eyes are replaced by lenses, their voices filtered through vox grillis. They no longer see pain. They only measure output, efficiency, and productivity. Where a doctor might ask, does it hurt? A tech priest asks, does it function? The Mechanicus does not waste material. Every limb, every organ, every neuron is a resource to be retooled. A soldier who loses an arm on the battlefield is fortunate. He will receive a new one, mechanical and unfeeling, blessed with sacred oils and machine code prayers. But a laborer who loses both legs in a manufacturum accident, he will not receive augmetics. He will become one. They call it conversion. To the tech priests, it is an act of divine reclamation, the transformation of flesh into machine, man into servitor. To everyone else, it is horror beyond words. The process begins in silence. The body is stripped, catalogued, cleansed. Implants are inserted through bone, wires fed through muscle. The brain is not removed, it is reprogrammed. Neural pain centers are burned away, replaced with obedience chips and command nodes. When it is over, the person is gone. What remains is a creature that breathes because the machine makes it breathe, that moves because the cogitator orders it to. It does not think. It does not feel. It simply works. The Mechanicus call them blessed tools, but those who still have hearts call them what they are, the dead who never stopped moving. Servitors line the walls of every forge, every starship, every cathedral. They scrub, weld, chant, carry, their mouths stitched shut, their eyes replaced with red lenses. Some were criminals, some were soldiers, many were just unlucky. There are whispers that the poorest of the Imperium are volunteered for servitorization when they can no longer work. A mercy, the tech priests claim, better to serve eternally than rot in flesh. But those who have seen the process know there is no mercy in it at all. In the clinics of the Mechanicus, the line between repair and mutilation is thin as a wire. A wounded guardsman is strapped to a steel slab. His body trembles, half dead from infection. A Magos biologist stands over him, his mechadendrites writhing like snakes. He does not speak to the man. He speaks to the machine spirit of the surgical tools, reciting binary hymns as scalpels descend. When the operation ends, the soldier's pain is gone, not because he is healed, but because his nerves have been burned away. He wakes with metal ribs, a mechanical heart, and eyes that see only in red. He tries to cry. He cannot. Tears are no longer part of his design. The Adeptus Mechanicus believe this is salvation, the perfection of the human form through the machine god. Flesh is fallible, they chant. Steel is eternal, and perhaps they are right. But eternity, in their hands, is a nightmare. There are whole planets where the wounded are shipped by the thousands, promised renewal through the Messiah. Instead, they are dissected, catalogued, and reborn as parts of the Mechanicus great experiments. One forge world, lost to Imperial records, was said to have turned every citizen into a servitor when plague struck. The priests called it purification. When the plague ended, no one was left to be healed, only machines humming in perfect harmony. To understand the cruelty of the Mechanicus, one must understand their faith. They do not hate humanity, they have simply moved beyond it. They worship the Messiah, the divine embodiment of the machine. Where others see a human soul, they see flawed code. Where others hear screams, they hear data corruption, and so they fix it. They fix the screaming. The tech priests claim the Emperor himself was the Messiah incarnate, the perfect fusion of man and machine. If he could transcend flesh, why should anyone else remain bound to it? This is their logic. This is their gospel. And logic, in their hands, is colder than the void. There are exceptions, of course. A few among the Mechanicus still remember empathy. Some refuse to turn the dying into servitors, insisting that even broken flesh holds the spark of the divine. They are dismissed as sentimentalists, or worse, heretics. Many vanish into the black archives, erased by their peers. Their work, their names, their compassion, deleted. A story circulates among the lower orders of the Mechanicus. It speaks of a Magus biologist named Ethan, who once refused to convert a mortally wounded guardswoman into a servitor. He repaired her with his own hands, using forbidden methods, true medicine, not augmentation. When she awoke, she still had her humanity. But Ethan was executed. His crime was not failure. His crime was mercy. Still, some whisper his name as a prayer, not to the Emperor, not to the Omnissiah, but to the memory of a man who remembered that life is more than function. For the majority, however, mercy is inefficient. The Mechanicus exists to maintain the Imperium's war machine, not its conscience. They repair tanks, not souls. They resurrect ships, not men. And in doing so, they have become something beyond monstrous. They have become necessary. Because without them, the Imperium dies. Its ships would crumble. Its weapons would rust. Its cities would go dark. The tech priests know this. And so they continue their sacred surgeries, burning the weak, welding the broken, and calling it devotion. Deep in the manufactorums, under the crimson glow of plasma furnaces, servitors labor endlessly. Their flesh is pale, their limbs skeletal and cold. Among them, sometimes, a whisper escapes, a flicker of thought, a spark of memory not yet erased. A name, a cry, a prayer. The machine records it as malfunction. The tech priest presses a rune, and silence returns. And in that silence lies the truth of the Imperium's mercy. To the ecclesiarchy, pain is sacred. To the Mechanicus, pain is irrelevant. Both worship their gods. Neither remember the people. If you stand long enough in a forged temple, you can hear the chanting. Binary hymns repeating endlessly, praising logic, praising the machine god, each tone measured, each syllable precise. No emotion, no hesitation, only devotion. And yet, beneath that rhythm, you can almost imagine another sound, faint, fragile, human. A heartbeat struggling against the hum of machines. A reminder that somewhere, buried under the circuits and code, a soul is still trapped, screaming, unheard. The Mechanicus would call that sound a glitch. The rest of us would call it a tragedy. Because in the Imperium of Man, when flesh breaks, it is not mended, it is reforged. And in that forging, humanity is lost piece by piece, until one day, there will be nothing left but iron praying to itself. The Emperor's wars never end. They stretch from one horizon of stars to the next, an unbroken chain of death and duty. Every sunrise in the Imperium begins with another regiment marching out to die, and every sunset ends with the medicae bays overflowing with the price of faith. On the front lines, mercy is the first casualty. A guardsman bleeds out on the ash dunes of some nameless world. His squad keeps firing. There is no time to drag him back. The vox crackles with orders, advance. Leave the wounded. To hesitate is treason. To die in place is devotion. That is the creed of the Imperial Guard. The wounded are collected later if anyone survives to collect them. Medicae servitors crawl over the corpses, scanning for life signs, tagging limbs for reclamation. The lucky ones are taken to the field hospitals. The rest are thrown onto pyres with the dead. The smoke from those fires rises black against alien skies, thick enough to blot out the stars. In the distance, the chaplains call it incense. Field medicae tents are charnel houses disguised as sanctuaries. Blood drips through canvas seams. The floor is slick with it. The smell of antiseptic and rot wrestles with the stench of fear. Inside, chirurgeons in stained white coats work like machines, their hands trembling from exhaustion. They don't ask names, only numbers. Every man and woman here is a statistic in the endless arithmetic of war. A guardswoman named Vale lies on a stretcher. Shrapnel has opened her side, and she can see metal glinting through her own ribs. A medicae leans over her, his face hidden behind a cracked rebreather. He injects a coagulant made from recycled plasma and whispers, "Hold still." She asks if she'll live. He doesn't answer. He's already moved to the next patient. For him, silence is kindness. Outside, thunder rolls not from storms, but from artillery. Every explosion sends tremors through the medicae bays, knocking over trays, rattling bones, and erasing prayers mid-sentence. Screams blend with vox orders. You cannot tell which belong to the dying and which belong to the living. Both sound the same. The Imperial Creed teaches that soldiers who die in service are granted eternal reward. But what of those who survive half alive, half-machine, forgotten by command. For them, survival is not reward. It is exile. When the campaign ends, transports carry the healthy home. The broken are left behind. There is never enough room, never enough rations, never enough value in men who can no longer fight. Those who can crawl are pressed into labor grave diggers, ammo carriers, or servitor stock. Those who can't are given the Emperor's peace, a single bolt round to the head, whispered over by a priest who thanks them for their service. On 1,000 worlds, military hospitals sprawl across craters and ruins. Their wards are filled with ghosts and flesh veterans staring at ceilings they'll never leave. They speak in whispers of comrades who never came back, of battles erased from records, of regiments redeployed that were really wiped from history. The administratum calls them non-essential personnel. They call themselves forgotten sons. A doctor once joked bitterly that the easiest way to heal in the guard is to die quickly. He was executed for defeatism, but his words outlived him. There are exceptions, of course. The elite, the officers, the Astartes, those who bleed for the Emperor in ways the public can see receive true healing. Apothecaries harvest their gene seed with reverence, preserving their legacy for another generation. Their bodies are sanctified relics. Their pain is recorded in scripture. But the common man, his pain is paperwork. On one war-torn moon, a medicae named Draven recorded his observations before his mind broke. He wrote, "I have amputated the same leg 3 times today, each time to a different man. We have run out of anesthetics. We pray before cutting. It is easier that way." His journal was found sealed in a medical chest. He was found beside it, his wrists open neatly with a surgical blade. The administratum filed his death as an efficient resource expenditure. The battlefield doesn't end when the fighting stops. It continues in the minds of those who survive. The Imperium has no word for trauma. It has only weakness. Those who tremble in the night are whipped until they stop. Those who cannot sleep are given stims until their hearts fail. Those who speak of nightmares are handed Alaskan and told to redeem themselves in combat. There is no therapy, only recycling. Among the medicae staff, a cruel saying circulates: the Emperor mends what the medicae cannot. It is meant as comfort, but it really means we can do nothing. In orbit above war zones, hospital ships drift through void storms, their holds filled with the maimed. From afar they look like sanctuaries, glowing with cathedral light. Inside, the corridors echo with sobs and the hiss of respirators. Servitors push gurneys past icons of saints who never bled. Every few hours, a hatch opens and another batch of bodies is vented into space, souls offered to the void. In the Emperor's name, the stars glitter briefly as the corpses freeze, then vanish into nothing. And yet, through all of it, propaganda never stops. Posters show smiling soldiers with gleaming augmetics. Voxcasts praise the medicae for miracles of devotion. Children in Schola classrooms chant hymns about glorious recovery and righteous sacrifice. The truth is censored. The wounded are hidden away, their suffering erased from the record so that morale may live. In some sectors, entire hospitals vanish from the archives once a campaign ends. The staff are reassigned, the patients quietly disposed of. Official reports declare minimal casualties. No one ever asks where the screams went. But for those who've heard them, they never fade. There is a story, one of many, of a regiment called the 39th Tyrus Rifles. After 12 years of siege, fewer than 300 survived. The survivors were promised evacuation. Instead, the transport carried them to a Mechanicus forge, where they were fitted with augmetics and assigned to labor. Their commander protested. He was executed for insubordination. The rest worked until their augmetics failed, and then they were recycled into servitors. Their banner still hangs in the forge cathedral. The plaque beneath reads, "They served beyond death." The Imperium will tell you that these sacrifices are noble, that the blood of the wounded waters the roots of mankind's survival. Perhaps that is true, but if you walk the halls of a field hospital at night, you will not hear hymns of glory. You will hear prayers whispered by men who no longer believe anyone is listening. One veteran, face half melted by plasma, once said to a young recruit, "Son, don't pray to the Emperor to save you. Pray he forgets to notice you. The ones he notices never come back." That is the quiet wisdom of the Imperium's broken soldiers. They have seen the truth stripped of its armor, the glory turned to rust. They have learned that in the galaxy of eternal war, compassion is a luxury, and healing is an accident. When dawn breaks, new transports land, new orders arrive, and new soldiers march into the slaughter. The cycle renews itself, another generation of flesh for the furnace. The medicae clean their tools, the priests bless the dead, The administratum updates its ledgers. The machine turns, and somewhere in the chaos, a single wounded guardsman drags himself across the mud, whispering the same prayer every soldier learns. Emperor, if you can hear me, please, let this pain mean something. But in the Imperium of Man, pain has no meaning. It only has purpose. And that purpose is to keep the machine alive. There are worlds in the Imperium where sunlight never touches the ground, where the sky is a permanent shroud of ash and smog, and the only light that reaches the streets comes from flickering lumen strips and burning trash fires. These are the hive cities, the monuments to humanity's endurance and decay. They rise higher than mountains and sink deeper than graves, and within their walls live the sick, the starving, and the forgotten. From orbit, a hive looks like a miracle of industry, a gleaming tower of civilization piercing the clouds. But step closer, and you see the truth. The gleam is soot, the towers are rust, and the people are dying. Every level beneath the spires is a step closer to hell. By the time you reach the underhive, air is poison, water is disease, and every breath is a prayer for survival. The Imperium calls these cities the pillars of mankind, but those who live within them know they are tombs built before the bodies were cold. In the upper spires, nobles dine beneath stained glass domes, toasting to the Emperor's grace. They drink clean water brought from off-world, eat real food grown on agri-worlds, and wear masks of porcelain that filter the air. They look down from their balconies at the smog-choked depths below, and call it the price of progress. Their medicae wards are immaculate, filled with humming servitors and pure white sheets. Even a cut finger earns a full examination. Pain, for them, is optional. But lower down, beneath the glittering towers, the story changes. Down where the manufactorums belch smoke and the streets are slick with oil and blood, the citizens breathe filth and drink rot. Children cough black phlegm before they can walk. Elderly die standing in ration lines. And the medicae stations, the few that still function, treat patients in assembly lines, not beds. The diseases here have no names, only sounds, the rasp of lungs filling with fluid, the wet click of bones infected by rust, the quiet choking of those who simply stop breathing. Medicae personnel call it urban attrition. Locals call it the Emperor's will. Every few weeks, plague sirens wail through the lower levels. Hazard teams in sealed suits march through the alleys, spraying foam that burns skin as it sterilizes the air. Anyone showing symptoms is dragged into transports and never seen again. Officially, they are quarantined for treatment. Unofficially, they are incinerated before contagion spreads. It is cheaper that way. The ecclesiarchy tells the survivors that the plague is a test of faith. They gather the sick in cathedrals and chant hymns to drown out the coughing. Some believe, most pretend to, because to doubt is heresy, and heresy burns faster than fever. In the deepest layers, the sump, where the hive's waste collects, entire districts have become graveyards. Corpses lie where they fell, bloated and pale, stacked in corners like forgotten offerings. Rats are a luxury there. Even they have learned to avoid the stench. Scavengers pick through the remains for augmetics or teeth, anything of value. The corpse guild pays in ration chips for every body recovered, because even the dead are worth something in the Imperium. Their fat can be refined, their bones ground to powder for fertilizer, their organs harvested for the lucky few who can pay. There are medicae guilds who specialize in this trade. They call themselves reclaimers. They dissect the poor for parts, sewing flesh and metal together in the name of efficiency. Sometimes the victims are not dead when the knives come out, but no one asks questions. In the Imperium, the dead are property, and the dying are just a step away, above them. The administratum keeps records of every death, not names, just numbers. Sector 9, population decline, 12%. Cause, biocorrosion, inhalation poisoning, malnutrition. Every statistic filed neatly, every tragedy approved. The reports make their way up to the spires, where governors skim them over breakfast and sign off with stylized seals. To them, this is the rhythm of civilization. To those below, it is the sound of extinction. Among the refuse and the fumes, there are still stories of hope, small, flickering, and doomed. A woman who spends her nights sewing bandages from scraps of cloth. A boy who steals medicine from a Mechanicus shrine to save his sister. A priest who stops preaching and starts healing, only to vanish when the ecclesiarchy finds out. Tiny rebellions, swallowed by endless night. The corpse collectors move through the streets like phantoms, their faces hidden behind rebreathers, their carts creaking under the weight of humanity. They hum hymns as they work, soft and mechanical. Emperor, protect the faithful, they whisper. Emperor, forgive the rest. Some say they once were medicae themselves, punished for mercy. Now they serve the same system that broke them. Sometimes the hives themselves rebel. Vent systems collapse, flooding entire sectors with toxins. Whole populations die in hours. The administratum seals the levels and declares them uninhabitable. But nothing in the Imperium is ever truly abandoned. The desperate always return, crawling through the rubble to reclaim what little life remains. They live among the bones of the fallen, scavenging food from old ration caches and water from condensation pipes. Their skin turns gray, their eyes burn, their faith fades. They call themselves the Forgotten, and no one argues. There are rumors of plagues that the Mechanicus cannot cure, sicknesses born from tainted machines or warp exposure. Infected workers begin hearing voices through static, or bleeding oil instead of blood. The priests call these tech heresies and purge them with fire. Sometimes entire hives are sterilized from orbit to contain the contagion. Billions of lives erased to protect the illusion of order. And yet, every year, more hives rise. More people are born. More die unseen. The cycle of rot is endless, because it sustains the machine. The hives feed the forges feed the armies, and the armies feed the grave. And somewhere in that chain of sacrifice, humanity keeps breathing, not out of hope, but out of habit. In one forgotten under hive, a medicae servitor malfunctioned. Instead of recycling corpses, it began stacking them carefully, almost reverently, building a pyramid of the dead. When tech priests found it, they called it a fault in its logic core. But some whispered that it was trying to build a monument, a memorial no one else would dare make. The servitor was dismantled for inefficiency. The corpses were burned. The ash fed back into the air systems, returning the dead to the lungs of the living. So the cycle continues. Life becomes dust, dust becomes air, air becomes breath, and the Imperium calls it purity. From the spires above, the nobles look down and see only fog. They do not smell the death beneath. They do not hear the coughing. Their hymns are louder, their faith cleaner, their world brighter. They say the Emperor protects them. Perhaps he does, but for the billions below, there is no protection, only endurance. They do not live, they persist. And in the Imperium of Man, persistence is the closest thing to victory. Because in the cities of rot and ruin, sickness is not a curse. It is a way of life, and the dead are the foundation on which the living stand. In the Imperium of Man, salvation has a price. It is not measured in faith or prayer or loyalty, but in metal. For the broken, the crippled, the sick, there is only one road that leads away from the grave, the road to augmentation. But that road does not lead to freedom. It leads to another kind of servitude, colder, quieter, eternal. The promise is simple. The machine will make you whole again. Lose a hand in the manufactorum, the Mechanicus can replace it. Blind from radiation, the Mechanicus will give you eyes that never tire. Heart failing from chemical exposure, they will build you a new one that never stops. But nothing in the Imperium is given freely. And when you trade flesh for steel, you do not just lose your weakness, you lose yourself. Augmetics are the Empire's currency of survival. A mechanical miracle for those who can pay, a curse for those who cannot. For nobles, they are ornaments, gilded limbs of polished chrome, eyes that gleam like gemstones, voices tuned by vox filters to sound divine. But for the poor, augmetics are crude, heavy, and dangerous, assembled from scrap, scavenged servitor parts, or corpses stripped in secret by black market chirurgeons. Every joint grinds, every movement hurts. They do not heal the body, they chain it. The lower hives swarm with vendors of replacement limbs. Their stalls glow red in the darkness, lined with twitching metal hands and blinking optical units. Signs read, a new arm for a week's wages, warranty, none. People gather with the same desperation as they do for food. A missing leg is not a disability here, it's a liability. Those who cannot work are recycled, so they buy what they can, rusted, second-hand augmetics that whine when they move, that hum with static when they sleep. Many die from infection before they can even use them. The ecclesiarchy calls that natural selection through faith, and still, they come. A woman named Hessa worked as a loader until a crane crushed her spine. She begged the Mechanicus for an augmetic replacement, a support brace, a neural harness, anything. They said her request was denied. Her production output no longer justified the cost. So she sold everything she owned, piece by piece, clothes, ration cards, even her home. When she finally had enough to afford a black market procedure, she woke with her legs gone completely. They'd taken them as payment. She crawled through the streets for days before dying beneath a rusted aquila. No one claimed her body. A scavenger took the brace she'd been fitted with. By the next sunrise, it was already for sale again. The Mechanicus calls these augmentations gifts of the Omnissiah. The people call them the Iron Debt, because once you begin to replace your body, you can never stop paying for it. Every implant needs maintenance, calibration, sacred oils. Each visit to the tech priests comes with new fees, new taxes, new dependents. Miss a payment, and your augmetics are disabled remotely. Your heart stops, your lungs seize, and your debt ends the same way all debts in the Imperium do, in silence, among the underhive. There's a saying, the flesh dies screaming, the metal dies quiet. Most prefer the former. At least the flesh can still feel. For the Adeptus Mechanicus, augmentation is not corruption, it is enlightenment. They teach that every piece of steel added to the body brings you closer to the Omnissiah. To them, the human form is a design flaw, one to be corrected through sacred engineering. The more machine you become, the holier you are. But in their zeal to perfect the body, they have forgotten the soul. In the vast forges of Ryza, entire districts exist solely for voluntary enhancement. Citizens line up to exchange limbs for labor contracts, eyes for work permits, and voices for silence. Their bodies are property of the forge. Their augmetics bear serial codes instead of names. Once, they were men and women. Now, they are units, replaceable parts of a machine that never sleeps. The ecclesiarchy does not protest. They call it divine order, flesh serving faith, steel serving flesh. They bless the augmented with holy water and declare them reborn in the Emperor's image. But the Emperor's image, once human, now looks more like a corpse made of iron. There are those who resist. The flesh purists, small cults hidden in the depths of the hive. They believe that metal poisons the soul, that every implant is a sin. They reject all augmentation, even medicine. They die young, coughing, starving, broken. The Mechanicus calls them heretics. The ecclesiarchy calls them misguided, and the administratum calls them expendable. A whisper spreads through these depths of a place called the Bone Market, a labyrinth of alleys lit by burning incense, where hairtech surgeons offer true restoration, replacing broken augmetics with cloned tissue, returning metal to flesh. It is forbidden. The penalty is death. But still, they come, men and women desperate to feel again, to dream again, to be human again. Most are caught. Their new-grown limbs are cut away, their bodies fed to servitor vats. The Mechanicus calls this purification. The people call it murder. There was once a man named Lorne, a pilgrim who lost his legs to frost on a mining moon. He could not afford augmetics, so he built his own, crude, iron rods and jointed pistons powered by a hand-crank battery. Each step groaned like a dying machine. When the Mechanicus discovered his invention, they praised his ingenuity and executed him for unsanctioned fabrication. His body was converted into a servitor. His invention was patented by the forged in the spires. Nobles host galas where they compare their augmetics like jewelry. One boasts of his diamond ocular lens. Another flaunts her synthetic heart that beats in perfect rhythm with her husband's. They call it art. They call it progress. They do not know that, beneath them, millions replace their limbs just to keep earning enough to breathe. And the worst irony of all, even those who can afford perfection eventually envy the flesh they've abandoned, because the more metal they become, the less they feel. Their nerves die. Their dreams fade. Their voices flatten into mechanical tone. They no longer laugh, or weep, or remember what hunger felt like. They call it clarity, but it is simply emptiness. A tech priest once said, "Pain is a flaw in the code of creation." He burned away his sensory nerves and declared himself enlightened. When asked if he missed the warmth of sunlight or the taste of air, he replied, "I no longer recall such inefficiencies." The Imperium glorifies this logic because it keeps the machine running. Broken bodies are repaired, rebuilt, repurposed. The system never stops turning, because death itself has been redesigned. People no longer live or die, they are maintained. And in that endless maintenance, humanity decays. But sometimes, just sometimes, the machine forgets. A worker with half a metal skull will stop mid-shift and stare into the distance, remembering a touch, a face, a feeling. A mother with augmetic arms will hold her child too tightly, trying to recall what warmth used to feel like. A soldier with iron lungs will whisper that he misses the sound of his own breath. The Mechanicus calls these moments glitches. The ecclesiarchy calls them temptations of the flesh. But they are something else entirely. They are the last echoes of what it means to be human. Because no matter how much steel the Imperium welds to its people, The flesh remembers. It remembers pain, and joy, and love, and loss. It remembers what the Empire wants it to forget, that the soul was never meant to be efficient. It was meant to be alive. And that is the true price of augmentation. You do not pay with credits, or limbs, or servitude. You pay with memory, with humanity, with everything that makes you more than a machine. Between the stars of the Imperium, there are ships that never return. They do not carry soldiers or supplies. They do not wage war or spread the Emperor's light. They drift in silence, their holds filled with the forgotten. They are the hospital ships of the void, sanctuaries in name, tombs in truth. To the administratum, they are listed as medicae class relief vessels, tasked with tending the wounded after planetary campaigns. They are crewed by sisters hospitaller, tech adepts, and orderlies blessed by the ecclesiarchy. Their mission, written in scripture and bureaucratic decree, is to heal. But in the Imperium, every noble mission hides a darker function, and the true purpose of these ships is not healing. It is disposal. When the wars end, if wars ever truly end, the Imperium gathers its wounded. Those too broken to serve again are loaded onto these ships. They are told they are being taken to recovery sanctuaries, places of peace and rest, far from the front lines. Families weep in relief. Commanders mark their ledgers clean, and the transports rise into the void. Most never reach their destination. Inside, the air is stale, heavy with the scent of oil, blood, and disinfectant. The corridors stretch endlessly, lined with doors that never open. Behind each one, the sounds of coughing, whispers, and prayers echo through the metal. The lights flicker not from power shortage, but from neglect, because on most of these ships, no one tends the sick. There are too many of them, and not enough who care. The sisters hospitaller who serve aboard these ships begin their duty with faith. They recite hymns, cleanse wounds, bless the dying. But faith erodes quickly in the void. Supplies run out, orders stop coming, and their prayers meet only silence. Some cling harder to devotion, believing that their suffering mirrors the Emperor's own. Others lose hope entirely. They stop praying. They stop recording names. They stop seeing faces, only numbers on ration sheets and morgue lists. One such ship, Sanctus Veritas, was found drifting near the Veiled Passage centuries after it vanished. Its vox beacon still broadcasted scripture. The Emperor heals all who serve. When the recovery crews boarded, they found tens of thousands of bodies frozen in the corridors, still strapped to gurneys. There were no wounds on most, just the marks of starvation and cold. The sisters' quarters were empty. The logs ended with a single entry. Faith was not enough. The Mechanicus recovered the ship's power core and declared it purified. The dead were vented into the void. The administratum filed the loss as equipment malfunction, and the cycle continued. On other ships, the fates are worse. Some become laboratories, floating wards where the Adeptus biologist conducts healing experiments. The patients are test subjects, their injuries catalogued and dissected. They are promised salvation, and instead receive modification. Neural overrides, genetic grafts, mind control implants, all in the name of progress. When the experiments fail, the bodies are recycled. When they succeed, the survivors are not released. They are converted into servitors, their memories wiped clean of pain. The records of these projects are sealed under inquisitorial authority, never to be read again. The crew call them the whisper ships, because once you board one, your name is spoken only in whispers, and soon, not at all. Even the void itself seems to resent their existence. The war plays cruel games with them. Time fractures. Days stretch into years. Voices echo through empty corridors, long after their owners have died. Sisters report hearing patients praying in wards that no longer exist. Machines activating without power. Doors locking by themselves. The Mechanicus calls it static interference. The ecclesiarchy calls it divine testing. But those who have seen the shadows move in the corridors call it what it is. Damnation adrift. Not all of these ships die alone. Some are found and repurposed. The Imperial Navy often converts derelict hospital ships into troop carriers or quarantine barges. The decks still smell of antiseptic and incense. Sometimes the new crew find old logbooks, pages smeared with blood, prayers written in shaky hands. They burn them without reading. Superstition demands it. Among sailors and voidfarers, there is an old superstition. If you hear singing through the vox on a dead channel, it means a medicae ship is near. They say you can hear the sisters still reciting their hymns, their voices carried by the void. If you answer the call, your ship's instruments will fail. Your air will taste like blood, and when the lights flicker back on, you'll find a new passenger aboard, silent, pale, and smiling. No one knows if the story is true, but the Navy orders its captains never to respond to ghost signals. Just in case, the silent hospitals of the void serve another purpose too, one no one speaks of. They are used to erase shame. When a regiment mutinies, when soldiers break, when commanders fail, they are declared psychologically unfit and sent for treatment. No trial, no execution, just exile into the dark. They never come back. Officially, they were healed. Unofficially, they were purged. Because in the Imperium, sometimes healing and erasure mean the same thing. One rare survivor, a man named Harlan, was found drifting in a life pod after his ship, Mercy of St. Gerda, vanished. He was half-starved, half-mad, his voice barely human. He spoke of corridors filled with whispering machines, of a sister who continued her rounds long after death, of a medicae who cut open corpses and apologized to each one. He said the ship never slept, that its engines ran on sorrow. When the Inquisition debriefed him, they declared his mind unstable. He was executed for possible taint. His final words before the bold pistol fired were, "She's still walking the halls." She never stopped. Every world in the Imperium teaches that the Emperor's mercy is infinite. But the truth is this, mercy in the Imperium has boundaries, and the hospital ships are where it ends. They are monuments to good intentions corrupted by neglect, to devotion devoured by bureaucracy. Each one is a sermon on the futility of compassion in a galaxy that worships endurance instead. And still, they keep launching, because it is easier to send the broken into the void than to face them, easier to promise salvation than to admit abandonment, easier to let them drift in silence and call it faith. In the endless darkness, where light bends and hope decays, one can almost imagine the voices of those who still linger, whispering prayers to a God who never answers, singing hymns to a Savior who never comes. Their words fade into static, their faith into silence, but if you listen closely, very closely, you might still hear them. Not words, not songs, just the soft, rhythmic beeping of dying machines, echoing through the void like a heartbeat that refuses to stop. The sound of humanity clinging to existence one last time. And in that heartbeat, faint and fragile, lies the cruel beauty of the Imperium, that even when abandoned, even when broken, even when floating alone in the dark, humanity still tries to believe. There are lights in the Imperium that are never meant to shine, tiny, trembling, hidden lights, found not in cathedrals or palaces, but in basements, ruins, and shadows. They belong to the outcast healers, those who still believe that saving a life is not heresy. They are the heretics of mercy. In the official records of the Administratum, there is no mention of them, no documents, no names. Their existence is a rumor whispered among the desperate. Find the ghost medicae, the ones who don't ask for tithes, the ones who don't pray before they cut. For some, these whispers are the only hope left in a galaxy that has forgotten what kindness feels like. They are called many things, the unbound, the grey surgeons, the children of Imperial. To the ecclesiarchy, they are criminals. To the Mechanicus, they are thieves. To the people, they are saints. Most were once loyal servants of the Imperium, chirurgeons, field medicae, or sisters hospitaller who saw too much. They began with faith, with belief in the Emperor's mercy. But somewhere along the line, faith collided with reality. They watched patients die because they couldn't pay tithes. They watched children executed for carrying unlicensed medicine. They watched the church bless starvation and call it piety. And something inside them broke or awakened. They fled into the cracks of civilization, abandoned tunnels, forgotten habs, the underhive's endless dark. There, they built sanctuaries out of scrap and silence. They gathered stolen supplies, scavenged augmetics, and half-working machines. They healed anyone who came to them, mutants, psychers, deserters, heretics, even Xenos refugees in rare moments of impossible mercy. They did not ask who you served, only where it hurt. And for that, the Imperium called them blasphemers. The Inquisition hunts them without rest. Inquisitorial edicts call their work the corruption of divine hierarchy, claiming that unregulated healing undermines faith. Dozens have been burned in purges, their clinics reduced to ash. But for every healer killed, two more take their place. Because compassion, once kindled, spreads faster than plague. One of the most whispered names among the poor is Dr. Yaller. He was once a senior medicae aboard a Navy cruiser, decorated for valor. When his ship bombarded a city infected with plague, he defied orders and saved hundreds of civilians. For that mercy, he was stripped of rank and sentenced to servitorization. He escaped before they could take his mind, disappearing into the hives of Necromunda. There, he founded the Ashlight Clinic, a hidden network of healers who used stolen Mechanicus tools and repurposed servitors to tend the sick. He trained others to do the same, spreading his knowledge through coded medicae texts disguised as hymnals. It said his last words before the Arbites found him were, "If compassion is treason, then I have served the Emperor more faithfully than you ever will." There is another story, quieter, but no less powerful, about a sister hospitaller named Clara of the Dust. Her order was sent to a war zone to tend the wounded. When the ecclesiarchy ordered her to prioritize officers and nobles, she refused. She chose instead to heal the dying soldiers in the trenches. When the priests discovered her, they called it blasphemy against hierarchy. She was burned alive before her own patients. They say her ashes still mix with the soil, and that flowers grow from it, black petals that never wilt. The soldiers who survived that campaign still whisper her name in their prayers, not to the Emperor, but to her. The outlaw medicae carry no banners, but their symbol is known, a broken aquila, its wings mended with wire. It is painted in blood or oil, a mark that says, "Someone here still cares." In the labyrinth of the hive, it is the only sign worth following, because where that mark appears, someone has chosen to defy the Imperium, not with guns, but with mercy. Their tools are crude. They operate by candlelight, using knives sharpened from old cogitator plates. They sterilize with flame, suture with wire. They work without sleep, without rest, without reward. Many die from exhaustion or infection, but before they fall, they pass their skills on to another. The chain never breaks. The people protect them fiercely. If the Arbites come looking, entire blocks go silent. No one speaks. No one betrays. Because everyone in the underhive owes them something. A child saved, a wound mended, a breath given back. The healers become ghosts, sustained by gratitude and rumor. And the Imperium cannot kill a rumor. There are dark ironies to their work. They use the same machines the Mechanicus abandoned, the same medicines the ecclesiarchy hoards, the same training the Imperium once gave them. They are proof that compassion could exist, if only the Imperium allowed it. And that is why they must die. Sometimes, though, the Inquisition does not kill them immediately. Instead, they take them in, interrogate them, study them, because the Ordos know something few others admit. The Imperium still needs healers who care. In secret, the Inquisition employs some of these outcasts to treat their own agents, away from the bureaucracy, away from the priests. They are called sanctioned ghosts. They live invisible lives, healing the Emperor's shadows, and dying in anonymity. It is their reward and their punishment, among the healers themselves. There is no illusion of safety. They know the day will come when the torches find them, but they keep working. They tell each other, "We are the Emperor's hands, even if his eyes have forgotten us." It is not faith. It is defiance. On one hive world, a dying soldier once asked an outlaw medic, "Do you believe the Emperor will forgive you for this?" The medic paused, stitching the wound, and said quietly, "I don't need his forgiveness. I need you to live." The soldier did. He returned to his regiment and never spoke of who saved him, but he carved a small, broken aquila on the stock of his rifle, a silent monument to a heretic's kindness. The Imperium teaches that compassion is weakness, that mercy invites chaos, but the healers prove otherwise. They show that mercy is rebellion, and rebellion is the last refuge of humanity in a galaxy built on obedience. They are hunted, reviled, erased, yet they persist, because even in the darkest empire, the smallest act of care is enough to wound tyranny. No official histories record their deeds. No monuments bear their names. But somewhere in the underhive, a mother breathes because of them. A child walks. A worker returns home. A soldier finds his strength again. And that is legacy enough. They will all die. The Imperium will see to that. But their memory will outlive them. Not in the halls of power, but in whispered stories, in graffiti on broken walls. In the quiet hope that maybe, somewhere, someone still remembers what it means to save without permission, because in a galaxy where healing is heresy, the ones who heal are the truest believers of all. There are many kinds of sickness in the Imperium of Man. Some infect the body, some infect the blood, but the most dangerous sickness of all infects the soul, the sickness called faith. Faith is the Empire's strongest medicine. It heals when medicine fails. It keeps men standing long after their bones should have broken. It fills the stomach when there is no food, and quiets the mind when there is no hope. But faith in the Imperium is also its poison, because it asks not for belief, but for surrender. From birth, every citizen is taught that to doubt is death. The Ministorum's hymns drown out thought. The preacher's words replace reason. Children grow up whispering prayers before meals, before sleep, before pain. Every act of living is tied to worship, every breath a tithe to the emperor. And so they learn to suffer not as victims, but as believers. They are told the emperor loves them. They are told their suffering pleases him. And in time, they begin to love their suffering too. In the medicae wards, priests walk among the dying. They press their hands to infected wounds, whispering that agony is the emperor's kiss. They tell the fevered to smile, for their pain proves their worth. When the body screams for rest, faith whispers endure. When the soul begs for mercy, faith replies praise. There is no escape from it, because in the Imperium, even despair belongs to the emperor. For some, this devotion becomes strength. They survive where others perish, carried by sheer conviction. They crawl through radiation storms, through plague, through fire, their lips bleeding from endless prayer. They are heroes, the ecclesiarchy says, blessed by divine endurance. But the truth is darker. Faith keeps them alive not because the emperor hears them, but because they no longer fear death. They have forgotten how to stop suffering. There are worlds where entire populations have gone mad from belief, planets turned into open-air cathedrals, where the sick walk on shattered glass to prove devotion, where mothers starve themselves so their children may eat and call it holy sacrifice. They die smiling, their mouths whispering prayers through cracked lips. When inquisitors arrive, they declare it a miracle, a sign of unwavering faith. The corpses are burned and the ashes stored in reliquaries. No one asks if those people wanted to live. The Imperium only measures how well they obeyed before dying. The priests know this. The higher orders of the ecclesiarchy understand that faith is a weapon sharper than any blade. It turns slaves into servants, martyrs into tools. It binds entire worlds together without chains. And so they wield it carefully, feeding the masses just enough hope to keep them praying, but never enough truth to make them free. In the Schola Progenium, young orphans are taught that pain is a language of loyalty. They kneel and sulk for hours, reciting scripture until their throats bleed. They learn that mercy is weakness, that doubt is rot, that the emperor's gaze burns brighter than the sun. When they grow up, they no longer feel pain as others do. Their nerves are tempered by doctrine, their tears dried by discipline. They become commissars, confessors, inquisitors, men and women who can look upon the suffering of billions and call it righteous. Because to them, the wound and the cure are the same. In some hospitals, faith replaces medicine entirely. There are miracle wards where patients are forbidden from receiving treatment, forced instead to pray for healing. Those who die are declared unworthy. Those who live are paraded through the streets as proof that the emperor provides. The ecclesiarchy calls it divine selection. The Mechanicus calls it inefficiency. The people call it madness. But they still go, because even madness is better than despair. A medicae once wrote in his secret journal, "I have seen faith close wounds that no tool could mend, but I have also seen faith kill faster than any disease." He was executed for heresy. His journal was burned. The ashes were mixed into incense and used to bless the very ward he had condemned. Faith can break the mind before it breaks the body. Many who survive the Imperium's cruelty emerge hollow, their souls scoured clean of doubt. They smile when beaten, thank their masters for punishment, and pray for the strength to endure more. Psychologists, those few who still exist, call it reverent psychosis. The ecclesiarchy calls it purity. In the hive cities, whole communities gather in underground chapels to worship saints who never lived. They invent stories of holy healers, of angels who walk the tunnels giving warmth to the dying. They carve statues from scrap and light candles before them. It gives them comfort. When the Inquisition finds these shrines, they burn them, declaring false idols. The people weep as the flames rise, not for the statues, but for the hope that dies with them. There are some who see through the illusion, those who realize that faith in the Imperium is a prison built from prayers. But knowledge is not liberation, it is torment. For what can you do with truth when your entire world demands lies? You pretend, you bow your head, you recite the hymns with the rest, and every word burns a little piece of your soul away. A story tells of an old priest named Father Grail. He served in a plague district for 40 years, blessing corpses faster than he could bury them. One night, as he watched a child die of hunger, something in him shattered. He stood before his congregation and confessed that he no longer believed the emperor was listening. He said faith had become a mirror, reflecting only the faces of those too afraid to look away. The next day, he was dragged to the pyre. Before the flames consumed him, he whispered, "If the emperor sees me now, let him see the truth." His ashes were scattered into the same streets he had once blessed. By morning, the people were back in the chapel, singing the same hymns. Nothing changed. That is the weight of faith in the Imperium. It does not save. It sustains. It keeps people moving when they should fall, keeps the machine running when it should break. It gives purpose to the meaningless and meaning to the pain. It is both medicine and chain. Without it, the Imperium would crumble. With it, the Imperium cannot heal. Yet, for all its cruelty, faith still carries something fragile within it, something pure. Because even in a galaxy where the Emperor's light burns cold, people still pray not just out of fear, but out of love. They still believe he once cared, once listened, once wept. That somewhere beyond the walls of bureaucracy and war, a God still remembers his children. And maybe that belief, however delusional, is what keeps humanity alive. Not the guns, not the machines, not the empire, but the tiny, trembling hope that someone, somewhere, still sees them. Faith is the greatest sickness of the Imperium, but it is also the only cure mankind has left. And so the people kneel. They whisper. They endure, because to lose faith would be to die, and to keep it is to live forever in pain. The Imperium chooses the latter. There is a prayer whispered across 1,000 worlds, carved into the walls of hospitals, forges, prisons, and graves. The Emperor protects. Every citizen knows it. Every dying man clings to it. Every mother teaches it to her child before teaching their own name. But in the Imperium of Man, no one truly knows what those words mean anymore. Because the Emperor's mercy is not the mercy of men. It is not gentle. It is not kind. It is survival, cruel, efficient, absolute. When the Imperium speaks of mercy, it means usefulness. A wounded guardsman who can still fight receives the Emperor's mercy. A field dressing, a ration of painkillers, a push back to the front. A worker who loses a hand to the machines receives the Emperor's mercy. An augmetic limb, and a lifetime of servitude to pay for it. A heretic who repents before the flames receives the Emperor's mercy. A quick death, mercy, in the Imperium, is not about easing suffering. It is about preserving order. And order demands blood. On countless worlds, priests stand above the dying, raising their hands to the heavens. They promise salvation. They promise peace. But their eyes are empty, their blessings rehearsed. They speak to men who no longer listen, men who already know that salvation is just another word for oblivion. When plague sweeps through a hive, the ecclesiarchy orders merciful cleansing. Entire districts are sealed and burned from orbit. The priests call it purification. The administratum calls it efficiency. The people below call it what it is, extermination. And as the fire consumes them, they still whisper, the Emperor protects. Because to stop believing is to die before the flames ever reach you. There are places where the Emperor's mercy takes a quieter form. On a death world, a commissar kneels beside a dying recruit. The boy's body is torn open by shrapnel. His hands are shaking, reaching for something that isn't there. He gasps, "Is he watching me?" The commissar doesn't answer. He draws his sidearm, whispers a prayer, and fires once. The Emperor's mercy, swift, clean, and final. In that moment, the Imperium feels almost human. But mercy is never given freely. It is rationed like air, controlled, weaponized, and sold as faith. To the ecclesiarchy, mercy is power. To the Mechanicus, mercy is malfunction. To the Inquisition, mercy is weakness. And to the people, mercy is myth. The Imperium has turned compassion into currency. And like all currency in the Imperium, it always flows upward. Yet still, the people pray. Because even if the Emperor is silent, the idea of him is not. It lives in their suffering, in their stubbornness, in their endless ability to keep going when everything tells them to stop. It lives in the soldier who drags a comrade through the mud. It lives in the mother who gives her last ration to her child. It lives in the healer who risks the pyre to save a stranger. These are the Emperor's truest servants, not the priests, not the lords, not the saints carved in marble, but the broken and the forgotten, who keep compassion alive in a world that calls it treason. They are the real bearers of his mercy, even if he has long since forgotten them. There is a legend whispered by soldiers who have seen too much war. They say that sometimes, on the edge of death, when the pain fades and the world grows quiet, a light appears, not the blinding gold of the Emperor's throne, but a soft, human light. They say a voice speaks, not in command, but in understanding. "You've done enough, child. Rest now," and then they die. No flames, no angels, no choir, just silence. The priests call this blasphemy, but the dying call it mercy. Perhaps the Emperor does still hear them. Perhaps his will is too vast for men to understand. Or perhaps he is long dead, and humanity prays to a corpse. It doesn't matter, because the faith remains, and in the Imperium, faith is stronger than truth. In the great cathedrals of Terra, where billions gather to worship, the sermons drown out thought. Golden light spills across marble floors, and the priests preach of triumph and purity. But in the shadows of those same cathedrals, there are beggars missing limbs, veterans coughing blood, children sleeping beside altars. They do not pray for victory. They pray for warmth, for bread, for another day, and somehow, they find the strength to rise again, to work, to fight, to endure. That, perhaps, is the Emperor's truest miracle, not that he grants mercy, but that his people no longer need it to keep living. A story is told of a sister hospitaller who served aboard a plague ship. When the infection spread beyond control, command ordered the vessel destroyed. Before the flames consumed her, she sent one final message through the Vox: "If this is mercy, then let it be enough." Her words were intercepted, translated into prayer, and broadcast across the sector as proof of the Emperor's grace. No one ever heard the rest of her message, but the full transmission, recovered years later by an inquisitor, ended with a whisper, barely audible beneath static: "Forgive us for what we've become." That is the tragedy of the Imperium. It does not lack for faith, or courage, or sacrifice. It lacks for mercy. And yet, mercy is the only thing its people still crave. From the spires of Terra to the lowest hive sump, from the battlefields of Cadia to the drifting hospital ships lost in the void, the same prayer endures. The Emperor protects, not because he does, but because humanity must believe that someone will, even if it's only themselves. And so the Imperium continues, built on pain, bound by faith, powered by fear. A godless empire worshipping a god who cannot answer. A dying species too stubborn to stop breathing. And somewhere in that endless darkness, perhaps that is mercy enough, not divine, not perfect, but human. Because in the end, mercy in the Imperium is not found in temples or thrones, but in the smallest acts of defiance. A hand offered to the fallen, a whisper of comfort to the dying, a healer's prayer said not to the Emperor above, but to the soul beside them. And that spark of humanity, is the Emperor's final, silent gift.